Hi, I'm Chris Gogan, the Marketing Brand Manager with InnoServe, and today we're going to talk about coffee and how good things come in brews. In this talk, we're going to go over the why of coffee, like why people drink coffee aside from the obvious. Then we're going to go over trends to show exactly how important this space is and different ways to think about approaching it. While we're discussing these different approaches, we're also going to hit on ways to move coffee away from just being for breakfast. We're also going to spend just a little bit of time talking about social responsibility when it comes to coffee as well. And finally, we're going to wrap it up by showing how InnoServe can help support your coffee program. But first, I wanted to start with the why of coffee. Why do people drink it, and why is it such an important part of our culture? Obviously, the knee-jerk reaction to that is the caffeine booze. Like, I'm not a functioning person until I've had my cup. But I'm here to contest that that's only one small part of it. At this point, coffee has become so ingrained in the fabric of our society that it's more than what it does for us physically. For example, if you were to just walk up to a stranger and say, "Hey, I'd like to buy you a coffee sometime." That's shorthand for I'm interested and I want to get to know you better. Or if you're gonna just meet up with friends for a quick chat, a coffee house tends to be that place. It's become so ubiquitous in our social zeitgeist that when you say, hey, you wanna meet up for a cup of coffee, it really means you wanna meet up and chat and just kinda hang out for a little bit. And this extends to the far more personal things. How many times have you made a big decision or had a really heavy talk over a cup of coffee? I know my wife and I, over a cup of coffee, recently decided whether we had enough room in our life right now to adopt this little guy who needed a home. In case you were wondering, the answer is yes.
It's a good boy. Yeah.
Aside from that social implication though, there's also a whole ritual and routine people build around a cup of coffee. How many of you on the way to work have to stop by the local Starbucks or your local coffee shop just to have that in your hand? Or first thing in the morning you throw on your pot of coffee at home before you really start your day? All of these things add a layer of comfort to our lives. And that gets to be really important when we start transferring that over to our customers. Take, for example, senior care. I mean, put yourself in the shoes of somebody who's found themselves in one of these long-term care providers. A lot of the things that were foundational to your life, your home, your regular daily routine is suddenly not there anymore. And as you start to form your new routines and build up your new normal, having that one anchor in your life, that thing that's been consistent, becomes super important. And when transferred to a restaurant as well, you become part of that routine and part of that comfort where people are having those conversations and social interactions together. This all brings around to what the crux of this presentation is really about, and that's the experience of coffee. And as we move on to different ways to sell this and present it to our customers, we really want to start talking about that experience versus just what's in your cup. So now that we've touched on the larger why do people drink coffee, let's start digging into the numbers a little bit. It turns out that Americans drink 146 billion cups of coffee a year. That equates to around 400 million cups of coffee every day, or 3.1 cups per person. I am contributing heartily, by the way. This is number 4. But that just goes to show you how wildly popular coffee is. In fact, it only comes in second place to water. I like to say water is what keeps me alive. Coffee is what keeps those around me alive. Coffee only comes in second place as the world's largest traded commodity behind oil. Again, the thing that keeps the world running and the thing that keeps the world running. And demographically, it covers a really large spread of the population, with well over 50% of people from the ages 25 all the way to 60 drinking coffee. And that 18 to 24 market is growing really quickly. And some of that has to do with trends that make coffee a lot more approachable to those younger palates. The top of which, for example, is cold brew coffee. Since heat isn't used in cold brew coffee, the tannins that usually break down when you're brewing coffee aren't present. That results in a much smoother, less bitter flavor that demographic tends to prefer. And that's great from a business side of it, because not only are you targeting a wider audience with that, but cold brew coffee is often drunk all day, not just in mornings. And it takes a minimal amount of equipment to actually make. You can literally make it with a 5-gallon bucket and a filter. With that much potential profitability and ease, the decision to offer cold brew kind of makes itself. Okay, at this point we've covered the why of coffee and the why it should be important to your business. Now I want to talk about taking coffee and changing how we look at it a little bit. I want to go ahead and take it out of just being that thing you offer at breakfast to being a main ingredient in a lot of different ways. We'll start though by trying to elevate that casual cup that we're already offering. Then we'll move on to using coffee as a seasoning ingredient and getting more out of the product that you already have. Going from there, we'll talk about the integration with different alcoholic beverages and different fun ways to think of using it as a dessert. So starting with our casual cup, again, the name of the game here is the experience of the coffee. Now, a lot of large coffee shops do this by the setting. They have like nice hardwood panels everywhere and like baristas with tattoos and piercings. Maybe some light jazz playing in the back. You know the place, the coffee shop. Their differentiator there is the experience. The place itself is part of that. But you don't have to change the vibe of the entire place to make a nice experience for coffee. Instead, you can change how that coffee is presented and how it's served. So for example, let's say you took a French press and you brought that to the table with a little timer. Maybe you have all the little things you can add into the coffee on the side, maybe some flavoring, different kinds of creamers. Now the customer is part of the brewing process. They get to sit and wait and watch as their coffee becomes coffee, then push down the little plunger and pour it into their cup. Add their custom ingredients exactly how they want their coffee to be. With these simple steps, we've taken what would have otherwise just been a basic coffee you poured into a mug and made into this fun experience that somebody can go through. Likewise, what if we emulated like an English tea time, right? They have all the little finger sandwiches, fun cookies, and cakes that come up on a little tower. So stealing those notes, maybe we invite in a lunch crowd and offer them some finger foods on a nice little tower presented on a platter. All things that pair nicely to different cups of coffee. These and all the examples that follow are just small little ideas to get your imagination running. Definitely run with this and make it fun. Now let's move away from coffee as coffee and think of it more of a seasoning. By adding coffee as an ingredient to like a rub that you'd use on meat, you're able to add this really caramelized, nutty richness to it. This gives you a whole different dimension of flavor to play with, and also gives you another use of that product that's taking up some space on your shelf. Not only that, but the acids that are inherent in coffee work as a great meat tenderizer. If you add it to a marinade, again, it not only imparts that interesting flavor, but it makes the meat more tender. Another large trend in this space, though, is also moving into adding coffee to cocktails. This is often perceived as being a better midday option because most cocktails that are mixed with coffee have a lower alcohol by volume than usual. This helps mix in that midday pick-me-up that coffee provides with a relaxing buzz supplied by the alcohol. This is another spot where cold brew really shines because again, it has a more mellow flavor, so it's not going to overpower the rest of the drink. Now, knee-jerk reaction when people start making coffee cocktails is to go right into the espresso martini. But if we look at some of these offerings from Starbucks Reserves, you'll see that there's loads of different ways to add coffee to cocktails. Fun old fashions and Manhattans. Even that fun French press idea we had from earlier is seen in this menu as a deconstructed drink. Again, we're leaning into that experience more, making coffee a fun part of the menu. Speaking of fun, coffee is the perfect complement to everybody's favorite part of dinner, dessert. Now, most time coffee is presented as kind of an afterthought, like if you want a little extra something at the end of the day, we just happen to have a coffee machine that's on. But that is a huge missed opportunity. So let's take it back to the beginning of the day. Let's take it back to the kind of classic American breakfast. One of the reasons coffee works so well with that, aside from the fact that it's in the morning and you want the coffee as a pick-me-up, is that brewed coffee has an inherent bitterness to it. A bitterness that just so happens to complement sweet really well. So when you have pancakes and waffles and all that stuff that we like to have for breakfast, coffee makes a great counterpoint to that really sweet dish. Back on the other side of your day, dessert has the same exact thing going on. You have these sweet dishes, which gives you a perfect way to bring coffee into that mix to complement those. So it's just one idea, perhaps a dessert flight, all these different coffees with maybe like ice cream float on the top of it to supply the cream, or like a waffle on top of it. This is just the perfect place to just kind of have fun with it. So whip out your cheesecake or like a nice tiramisu, which would be perfect to go with coffee, and pair that with a tasty latte of some sort or some other great coffee creation. This experience of the coffee is not only going to help you move more of that product, but it also has the ability to move other things along with it. Now, one last trend I'd like to cover, and this is a big one, comes down to sustainability. Sustainable coffee, or coffee of the conscious, is just coffee that's grown in a way that is not only better for the environment, but also helps provide a better livelihood for those who grow it. A perfect example of this, and one of GFS partners, is Thrive Farmers. Thrive actually provides 3 times more revenue to the growers than other fair trade coffees. This helps provide better livelihoods, educations for their families, better living arrangements. And aside from the fact that using products like this that are sustainable and conscious in this way genuinely makes the world a better place, but from a marketing point of view, that goodwill could then be placed onto your customers. Using one of these programs, you can advertise the fact that you are, and that by buying through you is going to help support these farmers and their families. It's a really strong messaging that everyone's getting behind, and is specifically strong in the millennial market right now. And if you're getting your coffee through Gordon Food Service, you might already be using Thrive beans. Our Mosaic brand coffee has been blending these beans into their roasts, so we can help give to this program and do our part in making these farmers' lives better. Speaking of doing our part, I now want to talk about how InnoServe can help support your coffee program. InnoServe is not only going to supply you the brewers needed in order to start your own coffee program, But our team of dedicated specialists are going to maintain those pieces of equipment to make sure you stay up and running. Furthermore, 24/7 emergency service, should you ever have a problem, somebody's always there to help you out. So not only do we provide and install those pieces of equipment, give you that proactive preventative maintenance and emergency service, but we'll also be there to help train your staff on the correct way to use that equipment. Not only that, but InnoServe also has its own green initiative. Our in-house refurbishment center can actually take an old piece of coffee equipment that's reached the end of its life and refurbish it so that it's like new. This helps out in two different ways. One, that piece of coffee equipment that would have otherwise ended up in a landfill now has new life. And two, the other piece of coffee equipment that would have had to have been built to replace that one now never has to come off the assembly line. All of which cuts down on our, and by extension your, carbon footprint. I hope this talk was informative for you and got those creative juices flowing to show you how good things come in brews.